Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about books with journeys in them. Where I live, summer is in full swing, kids aren't in school, a lot of people are taking time off to enjoy the nice weather and maybe go somewhere different. So I thought this would be a great time to talk about some books that I love that feature some type of journey, whether it is a one-way trip kind of thing, a classic there and back again, or something a little less conventional. Here are 10 books that I really love that have some type of a journey in them. Starting off with more of a one-way trip, the first book I have is The Arrival by Shantan. This is a graphic novel where we follow a main character who says goodbye to his family, sets off on a ship to a new country, and you get to go through the experience with him of being alone in an unfamiliar place where he doesn't speak the language. A lot of the food and animals are unfamiliar to him. And since he doesn't know the language, he can't just ask for help, but he's trying to just settle in and learn about this new place and figure out a life that he can live there. And you get to go on this sort of immigration journey with him where you get to have that experience with him. A lot of the food is unrecognizable as anything we'd find in real life. A lot of the animals look very alien, and there is no dialogue or text to speak of because he doesn't know the language, so it makes sense that we don't get to read anything either. I think this is a really interesting way to depict that type of experience and go along on that with him. The next book is potentially a one-way trip. Our main characters aren't exactly expecting to make it home, but the hope is that this would be a there and back again, and that is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This follows Clay Cooper, whose old friend shows up asking him for help. He's trying to get the band back together for one last trip to go into this very dire situation and save his daughter. Since Clay is a father himself and has a young daughter, he agrees to go. They get the band back together. I really love the characters in this story. I think they have a great dynamic. Even though this is more of a dangerous mission, there is a lighthearted tone to it and quite a bit of banter and just a little more offbeat things happening between the characters anyway, even though sometimes terrible things are happening to them as well. I think this is a really fun story of seeing some older guys get back together, try and relive their glory days in a way, but also with something really important at the end of that. These next few are some more standard there and back again, a bit more typical type of trip. First one is Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson. This is a standalone companion to Garlic and the Vampire. If you've read that, you'll already be familiar with these characters, but if not, you don't really need to. This follows a very sweet character named Garlic who is a living bulb of garlic, and she sets off on a journey to a magical market to find a specific ingredient to help one of her friends. She is very anxious, very unsure of herself and her own abilities, but she sets out anyway because it's important to her friend and therefore important to her. She's also going through some very personal changes that make her even more unsure of the future and what's going to happen on this trip, but it is a very heartwarming story. Garlic is such a sweet character, and the relationships she has with her friends are so wonderful to see. Very sweet, lighter read. Next up is The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Osiotomi. This is a much shorter story that came out earlier this year where we follow Tutu, who lives in a city in the middle of a very expansive desert, and his city has no water. His mother is looking like she's not going to survive much longer unless she gets some more water, so Tutu embarks out into the desert, and his hope is that he'll find some source of water to save his mother and potentially also save his city so they don't have to rely on other people to deliver water to them. Even though this is just set in an endless desert, I really liked the world building with this as we get to learn about the world outside of the city alongside Tutu, and also just seeing him develop. Even though this is a very short read, he does go through quite a bit of growth between leaving the city and his return. And I really loved seeing the determination that he persistently had throughout this, because he really just needed to save his mother. It was really all that he had, and he was willing to go on this impossible journey to do that. Next up is Minor Mage by T. Kingfisher. This is my favorite T. Kingfisher, and it's unfortunately also the one I hear the least about, so I want to talk about it every chance that I can. I love this story. It follows Oliver, who is a very minor mage. He only knows a few not very impressive spells. His familiar is an armadillo. And one day when his mother is out of town, the rest of the village bullies him into going on a very dangerous journey to save them from this drought that they are in that is threatening their entire village. So he sets off with just his armadillo. It's a very heartwarming story. It's just the right amount of spooky. There are some very creepy things that happen along the way. There is a bit of danger. We get to go on this journey with Oliver to hopefully make it to the end. And although he is scared along the way, rightfully so, he is very brave with some reassurance of his armadillo companion. And I just really love this story. I think it's very sweet, just a little bit spooky, but not too scary. And of course, I can't talk about books with journeys without mentioning The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the original There and Back Again. That is, in fact, the subtitle of the story. And for me, when I think of cozy fantasy, this is what I think of. This is peak cozy fantasy, in my opinion. We follow Bilbo, who lives a very comfortable, safe life in the Shire, and one day his world is kind of turned upside down, where he is brought on to go on a boys' trip, as I like to call it. He goes with a bunch of dwarves on this journey into the much bigger, much more dangerous world. I think it's a very fun, classic adventure to go on and explore this world, see where Bilbo goes, and how different he is when he finally returns home to the Shire. Next, I have a couple books where when the story begins, we're already at our destination, but we follow along with the main characters as they're doing whatever they came there to do. Whatever their task at that place is more important than how they arrived there. First up is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This follows Emily Wilde, who of course is writing an encyclopedia on fairies, and she has one type of fairies that very elusive, much more harder to track down and study than the other fae. And she goes to this small village to try and find them, try and get some more information on them. Her friend Wendell Bumblebee shows up to assist her, deciding that she probably needs his assistance. She's very socially awkward. Wendell, on the other hand, is very charming. I think they make a great duo, and I really liked both of these characters. We also get a lot of interaction with the townsfolk and, of course, the fae, who are causing trouble, as they tend to do. I'm not a huge fan of fae stories, but I really enjoyed this. I think the characters are so charming, and the writing just made it very engaging and immersive to just explore this world and figure out what's going to happen next with these characters. Overall, I just thought the story was a fun time. Then, a little bit more dangerous of a destination, we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This follows Ryland, who wakes up and he has no idea where he is or what he's doing there. You eventually find out that he is entirely alone in space on a very desperate mission to try and save humanity. No pressure, right? So entirely alone and not with all of his memories. When we first meet him, you eventually figure out how he arrived where he is, what he's actually there to try and do, and you get to watch him problem solve and not only figure out the problem, but try and find a solution to it that's actually going to work in time, and hope that he'll also, in that time, find a way to survive. And the last two books I want to talk about have different types of journeys, more in the time travel sense than the actually going somewhere. First is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is about a cafe where people can go, and there is a particular seat that if you sit in it, you can travel back in time, but you can only stay for so long as it takes a cup of coffee to get cold. people do this to have a conversation with someone that they've lost in one way or another and hopefully get some closure, maybe get an answer to a specific question, maybe just tell that person one thing, even though it's not going to change anything that's happened or will happen. It's just a personal closure for that person. We meet a few different people with various types of relationships, and they're all looking for different things out of this experience. I think it's a very interesting look at the question of, if you really had one last chance to talk to someone that you've lost, what would you tell them? What would you ask them? What would you hope to get out of that? And we go through a few different people in all different situations, different combinations of answers to those questions, and get to see what their experience is like, if it's very emotional, if it's not quite what they expected, or if they get something that they weren't anticipating out of that encounter. And the last one of my favorite tropes, even though I do think it is quite cheesy and dated at this point in time, I still really love this. I think it's very charming, and that is The Land That Time Forgot by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The first book in this is a trilogy, which together tell a full story. But this particular first installment follows Bowen Tyler, who is on a submarine and through a series of events winds up stuck on this island that seemingly time has forgotten about. It hasn't progressed. The people on it are living the way we might expect the original humans were living. The creatures on this island are ones that should be long extinct, and Bowen is just trying to learn a bit about the people that live there, stay safe from the creatures that are there, and also try and find a way off of this island so he can get home. I think this is a really interesting trope to explore. There's a lot of things talked about in this story that you might not really think about, the way people have developed the social structure on the island. It's a bit far-fetched, of course, but I think it's just a fun, interesting look at what if people were still living out there in less developed. They've kind of been left out of the modern world entirely. They're living with these creatures that humans have never actually lived with. I just think it's a fun story. It's a great adventure, and I really enjoy this one. So those are 10 books that I really like that all have very different types of journeys. Let me know what your favorite is, your favorite journey, whether or not it was on my list. I'd love to hear about that. That's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.